Elizabeth worked with me on a couple of cyber camps. She used to teach the engineering program, and then they canceled the robotics, so she moved into phishing. And I thought that might be a nice topic for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So she couldn't make it last week, so she agreed to come and talk tonight. So I appreciate her coming to do that. I think you'll find it interesting.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. You guys see my screen?
Oh yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna talk about the different ways to protect against email scams, also called phishing scams. And we're gonna talk about this. I'm gonna do my best to take a lot of the technical jargon out and kind of talk about what's important and what really matters in the day-to-day as you kind of get these things in your inbox and deal with it. So I'm Elizabeth Sneed, and like Jim said, I help out with the cyber camps. I'm a technical product manager for a company called Cofense, and they actually create phishing defense products for businesses. So we actually create products that train users to identify new email threats that are coming in, get those over to the IT departments, and then give the IT departments tools to identify real problems versus false positives really, really quickly, and help shut those down before they end up impacting the business. And so the short version of that is I lead teams that design software that help people understand and report phishing threats. And I really like to volunteer and teach STEM and cybersecurity, especially to students. So when I give this presentation today, I work for Cofense. This is not like an official one of their presentations or anything like that. I have some of their material in here. I also pull from other things online. I really get into this. So nothing in this presentation is necessarily the views or opinions of my employer. Just gotta officially say that. So to get started, one of the things before we ever get into what gets into your email inbox, right? The first thing to understand is this all revolves around something called social engineering. And that's a fancy way of saying that someone's trying to trick you and get you to do something that you wouldn't normally do. And we see social engineering every day in our lives, right? We teach children to be aware and be aware of strangers maybe coming up with stories, things like somebody saying that they lost their dog. And so, trying to get a kid to walk away with them. Kids calling into schools, pretending to be their parents so they can get out. A call on your phone. I think we've all been getting some of the massive amount of phone calls that pretend to be a company, but it's really a scam, or a lot of the scams that impact retired people, where they're trying to get money out of you and things like that. And then there's also a whole slew of things, and what we're going to talk about today are emails that you get. Mostly we're going to talk about your personal inbox, but also at work, and how they try to trick you into clicking things and downloading things and entering your information online kind of unawares. So the technical word for email scams is phishing, right? So it is somebody trying to get you to take the bait. So what happens is we have these, we're going to call them bad guys or threat actors, but they're out there and they're creating these emails that are meant to kind of draw you in and get you to do something. And you can see from this is an example for PayPal. So they'll use real branding. They'll try to make it lay out and look beautiful, just like a real branded email from PayPal. But what you're going to find, and we're going to go over a couple of different examples, is as we go through these, there's usually clues. And a lot of times we kind of pick these up and can't put our fingers on it. But we're going to go over some of the different clues and different examples of emails, so that if you notice something, you may not be able to exactly describe it, but you can at least identify something might be wrong, right? So in this case, we've got this email from PayPal, and it says, "We need your help. Your account has been suspended. An error was detected in your informations. The reason for the error is not certain, but for security reasons, we have suspended your account temporarily," with no period at the end. "We need you to update your informations to further use of your PayPal account. Update your information. You are currently disabled of," right? And so it's got all of these methods. And so when you first look at this, if you're just kind of scanning and not actually reading it, you'll miss that there's some pretty big signals in here that this is not a legitimate email. And so, the first thing to pay attention to is does it make sense, right? And so if they're using verbiage that doesn't make sense, or the language doesn't seem like it's necessarily like a native language speaker, whether it's English or Spanish or whatever your primary language is, because phishing comes in all languages, give it a second look before you get into it. By the way, if anybody has questions through this, feel free to stop me. So let's talk about what are the motivations behind phishing. So it's a fishy business. The main motivation for many of these bad guys is to harvest your data, right? So they are collecting what's called personally identifiable information, and they are collecting information on your digital identities. They are stealing proprietary data from businesses and organizations, and sometimes they're even trying to get their hands on medical data of people. They use all of this to kind of perpetuate additional scams. So if they get your personally identifiable information, so your name, your birth date, your social security number, along with your address or other information, they can start doing financial fraud. So tax fraud is very common, credit card fraud, other types of banking and wire transfer fraud, and they can also take out loans and credit cards in your name. The other thing, that if they're not necessarily immediately financially motivated, another tactic is that they will plant some sort of malicious software on your devices. So that could be your computer, that could be your cell phone, it could be a tablet. And depending on what they're after, they could do something like lock up your data and demand Bitcoins. They could, if you are part of some group, so for example, some groups are very into advocacy and they will try to disrupt businesses, or they will try to disrupt groups they disagree with, and they will target those individuals because they disagree with them, usually morally. And so you can, people can stalk your profiles, and they can try to plant things so they can get more information about whatever this is that they don't like, or disrupt that business. And then also the other purpose for planting malware is espionage. And I don't like to sound like I have a tinfoil hat on, but according to the Verizon data breach, espionage is actually one of the motivators in 25% of all breaches. And it's 44% of all breaches that target public and government organizations, right? And so this is 2018 data. 2019 has actually been really, really interesting. We've seen a lot of cities get hit with ransomware, which is being debated on whether or not that's espionage. But there is a lot of, kind of secret security warfare kind of going on in the background. So it does happen.
Question.
Yep.
Is it just my computer, or is everybody else getting this breakup around the edges of the picture?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm getting it too. Well,
I also got some audio distortion as well.
Try something.
Like a robot repeating what you're saying.
Oh no! All right,
Like
hold
to
on.
the very tail end.
Actually, it's fine for me, except for when you change slides, it's just got a little bit of a lag, but otherwise it's fine for me.
Okay. Let's see here. Let me see if I change my microphone. That's the built-in microphone.
Guys, on your side, if you shut your video down, sometimes it increases your bandwidth for audio, and for her video, so you might get a little bit better.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not having any trouble, but I had to turn my video off.
Okay.
Yeah, audio is fine. I'm just getting these little blocks popping up around the edges where it's like it's a disrupted signal.
Yeah, I'm getting the same thing.
Hold on. Is that doing anything? Oh, got everybody faces on here. I'm trying to see if that, let me stop and reshare real quick and see if that changes anything.
Yeah, I think it's when you move your mouse, for some reason, we get a shadow.
Right.
When you move your mouse over the screen, we get kind of a shadow of whatever's behind it.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll use my keyboard then. So do this. Your faces are all right in the middle, so I'm gonna move this up here. Let me get back over to my slides. All right. Any issues right now?
Looks good.
All right. So things to remember, right? So we're talking about email threats. So the bad guys, they don't really care about copyright. So they tend to use well-known brands that you're going to trust, right? And so they are, these are the top 10 brands that were used in 2019 with, banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America being some of the top credential places, the IRS being heavily targeted, usually because they want to get your credentials so they can submit your taxes falsely and do tax fraud. And then you've got organizations like Microsoft. And since Microsoft is a major SSO provider and a lot of businesses run on it, a lot of threat actors are trying to get those credentials so they can actually log into your work and try to get into those systems. And then for the rest of these, it's a mix of trying to get you to open documents, trying to get you to enter your credentials. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. I know I keep saying credentials, and when I say that, that's usually a username or your email address and your passwords. And that's going to be kind of important as we continue to talk through this. But before we do that, I want to go through just some examples of phish. So that if you guys experience something like this, you kind of know that this is out there. So one of the first types that's important, and it can be any brand. This is actually a DocuSign, which was one of the ones on the list. It's used a lot in business to complete documents and send them back and forth. And so it's meant to look like somebody sent you. And a lot of times bad guys will try to target, they'll watch your LinkedIn. So if you're being targeted specifically, they may watch your LinkedIn and see if you got a new job. And they'll pretend to be from HR. They'll pretend to be, somebody else in the business and send you this fake email. When you click the link, it then sends you to this page, right? And it says you need to log on using whichever one of these services you're using. And depending on the business, a couple different things can happen. So if you click on any of these, it will take you to a page that looks like it's for Google, looks like it's for Microsoft. And when you enter your credentials, it won't be, right? It'll be the bad guys storing those and then probably sending you, redirecting you to the actual legitimate site. So you may never even know it happened. That they'll use that then to understand, like, okay, if you're at work, they'll know which of these different providers are being used, and they can, if they actually got your credentials, then they can also use those to start trying to get into the system and trying to break in. If it's your credentials, that's kind of a whole nother ball of wax. They tend to collect kind of profiles, and they'll collect your credentials and your passwords, and they'll start trying to use those against any other profiles that they know you have. So that's exciting. Very, very common one is Amazon. Since Amazon sends, it's just such a major retailer and it's online, they will send something saying, dear customer, which is very generic because Amazon knows who you are. You have received an email for security reasons, right? And again, it's very generic. I really think these are funny. For security reasons, what are those, right? Typically, if an organization is saying that there's a problem, they're pretty descriptive of what's going on. And so they're trying to get you to click this link, and then very likely, if that link goes to a web page that they set up, they'll try to get you to put in your credentials, but you don't know what that link is. And so they could also actually use that to download files onto your computer. I'm doing my mouse again, I'm sorry. There are situations where bad guys actually know that certain systems are not, have vulnerabilities. And so if they can get certain files on your computer, even if you just download them and you never actually open them, they can actually do some damage, even doing that. So here's another one. This one's actually from a couple of months ago. So that little document, it's pretending to be a resume from somebody who said that they were interested in a position. And you can see that the resume actually doesn't have any size to it. That 0 KB means that it's got nothing there. It's very, very tiny, which is kind of suspicious, and it would be very hard to spot, right? So especially if you work in HR. But what this actually does is it downloads a piece of malware that once it's on your computer, it watches what you do, and it can actually download other pieces of malicious software. It's called a remote access Trojan. And so it gives the bad guys kind of a foothold into the computer so they can set up other types of malware and kind of keyloggers or things like that, and kind of watch what you're doing. Typically for home use, this isn't necessarily as popular unless they know you have a lot of money, know you're into Bitcoins, something like that. There's usually some reason they target people. It's much more common with businesses, but it does happen. very common. You know, a Microsoft verification alert, again, much more common with business. But again, they're trying to scare you. And if you look at this, you can see that the Microsoft team, they have a really weird email address there, and they're trying to say, final warning, your email is going to be shut down, which is very dramatic for email things. So Microsoft verification alert, dear user, your email is currently not upgraded. And I didn't even know that you could upgrade your email. So that's not a thing. The spelling is off, the punctuation is off. Upgrade now to avoid email issues. And again, they're trying to trick you into clicking that link. And we don't know what that link's going to do. So if you get these in your emails, one of the things you can do is hover over the link to see if it's got a trusted domain, but even that can be a little tricky. So the best thing to do is if you don't know who it's from and it smells a little funny, just don't interact with it. Because or if you know if it should be from somebody you know, then call them or message them via some other means. LinkedIn is a very common one. So again, this one's a little fishy because of the various people on the account. Typically when LinkedIn emails you, they only send it to you. They don't add it to a bunch of different people. So this is somebody just trying to send an email. And this is just like, this is something I want to talk about too, is, you know, there's this perception that some of these hackers are very, very advanced. And there are some really advanced hackers out there, but a lot of them are just people sending emails through normal email accounts and trying to trick people into clicking. And so you can see here, they've got kind of a weird URL going on for LinkedIn. And you'll see this with a lot of different kind of malicious sites. They'll try to make it look like it's the legitimate site, but it might be spelled a little bit different, or they might have extra letters in there. And they're hoping that you just don't know it. And again, they're trying to use that account suspended. They're trying to get you very interested, very quick into it. And again, these are kind of generic ones, but they are definitely sent out all the time. Again, this is something I think you should be aware of. I don't know if anybody's in HR. So this looks like it wouldn't, like you'd think that you'd spot it, but it says it's from Heather Smith at company, and those have been updated so that they don't actually reveal who this is. But this is a real thing that gets sent to people. It says, treat is urgent. Hi, I need copies of all of the employee W-2 wage and tax statements for 2017 to complete a business transaction. I need them in PDF format. Please send them as an attachment as soon as you can, from Heather. So this attacker very likely did some research, found out that the Steve Adams worked in a position that was either HR or finance, and is pretending to be either VP or CEO. It's very likely that if we actually look at that it's very likely you can spoof it. You can make it look like it's actually from somebody when it's not. And so there are actually many, many instances of well-meaning people sending out an entire organization's tax information. So that would be your personal W-2s to an attacker and breaching all of that information. It's really, really awful when that happens, because there's no way to get that information back. And you cannot actually update your social security number or change any of your information until you can prove that fraud's been done against you. And sometimes it's very hard to prove even when it does happen. So one of the things that you can do, should you ever be in a position at work, or should you know anybody at work that might get something odd like this, is you typically call the person. You call them, you message them, you contact them, doesn't matter how, but you don't necessarily just respond to them and send them the entire company's W-2s. But usually you want to, contact them and find out, like, why do you need this? Is this a thing? And very often you're going to find out that they didn't make that request, that is somebody else impersonating them. So
this is Amanda. Sorry to, incredibly timely and ironic, because it's Cybersecurity Month, Awareness Month, right? I work for a company that does cybersecurity. And about 300 of us yesterday morning got an email from our CEO that said urgent in the subject line, and it said, I need your mobile number immediately. There's something I need you to take care of.
Right.
And so fortunately, I'm very good friends with the CEO, and I was like, she would never ask for my mobile number. So I hovered over the name, because you can change the name that comes up on your email. So I hovered over the name, and it was some random email address that wasn't her, but a lot of people responded because it was so innocuous. Just need
Right.
your mobile. When the CEO says, send me your cell phone number, a lot of people complied, right? So just
Right.
real world scenario that literally happened yesterday morning.
Well, and that's a really interesting case. So I'm assuming, like many companies, you probably have some sort of naming convention for your emails. It might be first or last name, or first initial and last name. Is that accurate?
Yep, first initial, last name.
Okay. And so if somehow a malicious actor got the emails from everybody, or a very large group of people, and that could be, they could have scraped them off of LinkedIn, they could have found them, or they could have figured out what that combination is and started looking for employees on LinkedIn. There could be a breach through a third-party vendor that works with your company. There's a lot of different ways they can do that. But you know, what they're doing then is saying, okay, well, I've got this person, I probably have their name, right? And then now I'm going to get their email, or their phone numbers. Right now, what are they going to do with that? Now, that particular actor might do nothing with that. They may sell that to somebody else or multiple parties, right, to do additional types of fraud, or necessarily they know where you work now. They probably know your name. They know your personal phone number. They may be able to reverse look that up. They may be able to find your social media accounts. So once they start gathering information like that, it becomes kind of this flywheel that's kind of hard to stop, and you don't really know what this person that you don't even know who they are, like what they're going to do with that, or who they're going to share it with. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to scare everybody, but like, it's very interesting how quickly that that data kind of builds up, and what the bad guys can do with it. So I want to go over real quick some kind of common misconception about email scams. And I know I've been saying things that are a little intimidating. But the first thing I want to talk about is that, you know, this misconception that hackers are using, or elite technology users. I want to talk about, you know, this concept. You know, a lot of us think of us as non-technical, and it's like, well, what can I do to prevent hacking, right? And then there's this kind of third thing, like, nobody's doing anything about this. So I want to talk about all of these a little bit. I'm not sure what your all experiences are, but these are things that I find a lot of people, you know, may have certain assumptions about, and I just want to talk through them. So something to keep in mind. There are studies that show that almost 60% of all people reuse their passwords, and a lot, right? So you may have one or two passwords, and maybe you use that on a bunch of different sites. You know, 70% of employees surveyed have admitted to reusing their passwords from work, right? So you're using the same ones at work and at home. And so something to keep in mind is in the 2018, 3/4, 75% or more of all phishing attacks are targeting credentials, right? And so they're credentials for, and that's your email address or username and password for things like financial institutions, your email accounts, any cloud accounts you have. So that could be music, that could be Netflix, that could be anything like that, payments accounts, and other kind of online services. And so something to keep in mind is that many of these hackers, and when we talk about hacks, and I feel like the media kind of does us a disservice, a lot of these hackers are people who are just collecting passwords, and they're looking for your email address over and over again, right? So they maybe use one or two different tools, you know, and they're very good at those, but they're not necessarily elite technology users. A lot of times they're buying kits that somebody else is making, and they can only use a couple of tools. And what they're doing is they're doing everything they can to collect a very small amount of information. And because a lot of us have habits of kind of reusing passwords, they'll just use it over and over again. They'll find out, let's say that phone number, that could also be used for what is it called? Two-factor verification. So now they know your phone number, they know you have a bank account somewhere. They're going to call you pretending to be the bank and say, hey, we noticed that you had some fraud on your account. Can you verify your information? Right? So they've used a phishing email to get your information so they can then try other scams. But that, you don't have to be an elite hacker to do that. Any one of you on this call could send out an email. Don't do it, by the way, but could send out an email saying, you know, hey, this is super important, and I'm this person, you know, and I really need this information, right? And then you two could call and make scams and do things like that. Those are not, you know, necessarily these unbeatable odds. So So yeah, it's important to know that hackers are collecting this information. They're collecting your usernames, they're collecting your passwords, they're finding out what, you know, they'll run these little scripts against websites to see if you have an account, and then they'll try to see if anything that they found in the past will work on those. Somebody have a question? No question? Okay. Somebody may not be muted. Okay. So, so they may only know how to use a really small set of tools. And I just want you to keep that in mind, in that there are some really scary hacks out there, but the vast majority of them are really revolving around passwords and the reuse of passwords. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So as a non-technical person, what can you do? Well, you can use a different password for each of your sites. And I know that sounds really awful. We all go to work and we have these very long meetings about how to do your passwords and reminders, and it's really, really painful. But it's important to do, because when these guys are collecting them, if you have different passwords for each of these sites, they can't reuse them, right? That makes it really hard for these kind of low-level bad guys to get into your stuff. Now, there's something called a password vault, and I'm just going to show you a couple of them. And if you get a chance, I really recommend going out and kind of researching them, because they can make your life a lot easier. So as opposed to having 1,000 sticky notes, or writing them on your palm, or putting a notepad under your desk, or whatever other ways that you guys might want to store passwords, these password vaults, you remember one really good password. So you only have to remember one, and then every site that you get, you put a new ratably generated password in there, and then you copy it every time you need to use it. You don't ever have to type it in. You actually have a little device, this little program that sits either on your phone, your computer, or your tablet. And you can actually you know, store the password in there. It's all encrypted, it's safe. You have a big long password to let yourself in. You copy what you need to copy out, and then you put that into the sites. And that's a little bit of a different kind of workflow, but it can protect you. And it can protect you from a lot of different kind of attacks that can happen. So some common password vaults are KeePass and LastPass. I'm just going to show you those real quick. So this is KeePass. I like this one. So I don't pay for a lot of things, and so KeePass is an open source password vault, and the website for it looks like it's from the 90s. It's very old, but it's an open source project. It's really well trusted. A lot of different groups use it. But what you can see here is on one side, it's showing you all your different little accounts, and on the other side, it's actually showing you the title of that account, what your username is, what your password is, and it can randomly generate those. And basically, you just get to copy it and then put it into that box when you go to put your password in. A super fancy and paid for version is something like LastPass. And you can see that they've got it for all the different devices and all the different things. And by the way, I'm not getting paid to talk about any of these. I just want you guys to see what some of these are, because they can really make the difference. If you find something that you like and that is easy to use, it can really help protect you. So moving on, the other thing to keep in mind is that these threats are constantly evolving. And so I'm going to go through some examples, and I know this is a little technical, but it's just to get you into the mindset that these things don't stay the same, right? Bad guys are constantly being thwarted, and they're finding new ways to kind of work around technology. So, you know, phishing volume rose 41% this year from last year. That's a lot. There's, I mean, millions of these phishing emails are going out a day, and they're targeting people all over different things. So SSL, and you don't need to know what that is, but it's the lock, right? And a lot of people tell you, if the lock is in the top of your browser, it's safe, right? Well, they used to say that because a lot of these malicious sites couldn't get access to those sort of certificates to make them trusted or to make them secure. Well, the bad guys have now discovered that if they put the lock on their websites, it makes the data that going from you to them more secure, and you trust it, so you're more likely to put it in. So the bad guys will very often like steal credit cards, go buy these certificates that make your site look trusted, and then also use SSL, which is, it's a long story, but it just means that it looks like your data's protected from between you and that site. But if the site's a bad guy, then it's great that it's protected, but it's still going to a bad person. So so that is the basic, but they have been using that increasingly because they know that people trust the lock in the top of the browser. I'm not going to go over these, but basically what it's saying is that They'll use domains that look very similar to things that you're used to. They'll use, you know, like a linkedin.com with an extra L. They'll use something like a microsoft.com or with numbers and letters. They'll use subdomains. They'll use in the emails, like you were saying earlier, you can change your display name. So they'll use that to try to trick you. And it's constantly, you know, they're constantly finding new ways to work around that. So just remember, and this is really important because my mother said this to me, and I think it's an important thing. She goes, well, aren't the tech guys just going to handle it? And she's got a great point. But because these bad guys are constantly updating and changing and trying to find ways around the protections we have, you have to be vigilant because they're looking for new ways to get to you and to businesses and get to that information. And so they're going to keep evolving those attacks. I got a couple of kind of cool examples right here. So I don't know if anybody got hit with this, but recently a bunch of people have been getting these ridiculous spam messages in their Google calendars. This particular attack is because the bad guys realized that there is a default setting that just accepts invites on your calendars if it's sent through a Google API. So the bad guys went out and they bought some space and they started sending out malicious invites that say your account is debited, you know, and all sorts of scary things, or enter this survey. And some of it's spammy and some of it's very malicious. And the intent is this: if it's on your phone, you can't report it. There's not a way from your phone to report these in Google Calendar. And also because your phone is smaller, you're more likely to click the link. And so it was a very, I mean, awful, but ingenious way to start to keep getting these messages directly in front of people. And so they pop up, you know, they're timed. So they'll set them up for the next day. You know, you're going about your day. And if you didn't, maybe you use Google Calendars, maybe you use another calendar. But usually if you have a Google phone, and a lot of people have Android, it'll pop up on your screen. And so it is a way that they have used to kind of find a new method to attack people. Earlier this month, there was a really cool, it's not cool, it's awful, but the next generation of scams, basically they got a bunch of different recordings of the CEO's voice. They used AI, so they used a computer to figure out how to talk like the CEO. They called an employee with the computer, and the computer pretended to be the CEO and told the employee to transfer $243,000 to this account. And the employee did it. And then the phone CEO said, actually, can you do another one? And the employee realized there was something wrong. And they realized it's the first time they've been able to record this whole concept of deep fake of CEO voice, right? So if you've got a lot of information out there, they're constantly looking for new ways to kind of use that. I know we're running out of time. Oh, I'm sorry, I went over. Do you guys need me to stop? I'll keep going. How much? Okay, all right, I'm close. So the last thing I kind of want to go over is that no one cares about these scams. And I think this is important to know. What you really need to know is that there are tons of organizations that are trying to protect each other and themselves and each other. And so there are networks that trade this information daily to try to find new ways to block these attacks. So reporting, and we're going to talk about how to report, is one of the #1 ways that you can help prevent those attacks from happening to other people. And you know, once you do that, you may never hear back, but it does not mean that it was not important. You may never get any feedback about it, but every time you report something, I mean, there are massive amount of data just trading between companies looking for these scams. And so every little piece counts when they're trying to track these down. So reporting these, each email does it a little differently. Google has a, you know, and this is showing that they kind of spoofed this, but this is showing that, you know, all you have to do is hit the little arrow or the 3 dots in Google, and you same thing for your phone, and they have the ability to report spam or report phishing. And so when you report phishing, it goes to a very specific type of feed that Google uses to identify those things and keep other users from getting that. A lot of businesses have a button. This is the button we have at CoFence, but I know that there's other vendors and other organizations, they have different ways to report. Sometimes they'll tell you to forward an email, sometimes they'll have something in the email, sometimes they'll have a button. But if you do that, you know, just make sure if you have anything suspicious, try to get it over to the IT department. Same thing, Yahoo or any other mail service. Usually, if you look, they've got a breakout for where you can report phishing. And I want to talk about one more thing that is a little bit more effort, but it depends on how mad you are about somebody trying to scam you. So many organizations, so let's say that you're a customer. If you're getting phishing about, especially somebody that you are a customer of, they almost always have an abuse address. And so it can be this one, Netflix has phishing at Netflix. You can also call, I actually got a really good Capital One phish, and I actually called them because I thought that they had some screwy deal going on and I didn't understand, and they told me, and that's when I realized it was a phish, and they actually gave me the email over the phone that I could send it to. And once they get in there, there's a couple different things that can happen. They can watch your account a little bit more closely because they know that somebody's targeting you. And then they're also going to tear apart every single piece of information in that email. And there's a lot more than just what's displayed there to try to figure out who's doing that, because they want to protect their organizations and they want to shut them down. So you can actually do a lot of good if you report that stuff. So last, what do I do if I click a link or download a file or open an attachment? Like, what happens? Your computer, tablet, or phone may be infected. If there's a known vulnerability, you may not know that, right? That's really hard to know. They can also install different applications. A lot of people, or a lot of bad guys, will install things like Bitcoin miners on your devices, or they may use it once they get programs in the background to transfer illegal data or capture your typing so they can find out what other accounts you have. And what happens then in the situation where you go to a site and you thought it was a legitimate site and you entered information? Well, that info is not going to be secret again, right? You don't know where they're going to trade it. You don't know where it's going to be sold, and it will be used to attempt to compromise your other accounts. And so, what you can do, and I'm actually going to reverse the order of these two. So, if you entered information, the first thing you do is change your password to a new one. Update your password to any other website. So, if you don't have to tell me if you're reusing passwords, but go change it in any other place that you know it exists. And then if it's for a financial institution or if it's for a specific vendor, let them know that you accidentally sent those, and give them as much information as you can. And they may have specific instructions on what to do. And if you click the link or downloaded a file or open an attachment, those are a little bit more tricky because you just don't know what they're doing in the background. But update antivirus, stop accessing sensitive sites until you get a chance to really get the situation assessed. And you really want to reach out. You want to talk to somebody in IT, and go to whatever your local IT shop is. Let them know, I downloaded something, I did this, whatever that is, and have them check out the computer. And they may have some antiviruses or other services that they can do to just tell you it's all clear, because you don't know what's on your computer at that point. And in the end, I know they might have to reinstall things. It can be really messy, but in the end, you're the only one who's protecting your data. And if you have somebody else on your device stealing your information, that's bad news, right? So in the end, nobody's going to go find that for you. So, try to stay vigilant, try to stay aware, and do the best you can. So with all of that, I hope the key takeaways are, just don't trust the security pros to handle it. That you can prevent hacking, right? Because a lot of the hacking is just social engineering, and it's just scams, right? We looked at some common phishing scams. We talked about why the bad guys do it and some of their motivators and how they do it. And then we talked about some ways that you can protect yourself and what to do if you fall victim to an attack. And I hope, sorry I went over, but I hope that was interesting. And if anybody has any questions, I'm always available, so.
Thanks a lot. That was great. Great presentation.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you. I'm used to talking to 12-year-olds, so this is very new. So, yeah.
And I don't feel
Thanks for coming.
Good information. Thank you.
I think we lost Greg.
I really liked your presentation.
Oh, no,
Thanks
there
a
he
lot,
is.
Elizabeth.
Hey, quick question. I've used Data Vault for a lot of years for password protection.
Okay.
Any comment on that one?
I haven't used them, but I don't really care what, a lot of people just don't even know what a password vault is. So it doesn't matter if it's that one, it doesn't matter if it's LastPass, it doesn't matter, if you're using it, you're, doing better than many, many people. So I don't know the specifics on that one.
what I've liked about that one is it uses an encrypted file through Dropbox, and it keeps my telephone version and my laptop version updated with each other.
Yeah. So the one I was showing you, KeyPass, works the exact same way. So there's an encrypted file through Dropbox, and it syncs between all your devices, and that's what I use.
It's automatic. I don't ever push it from one or the other.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
As soon as you save it, it updates, and so it's just if you know how to do that, and you have a Dropbox account or you have some sort of file account that syncs, then the free ones are pretty easy to use. But if you don't know how to do that and it's a little bit more complicated, sometimes it's better to get one of the paid ones just so you don't have to worry about that or do the technical aspects of it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Mac,
Elizabeth.
certain one that works better for Mac?
I use KeyPass on Mac. I use it on Mac. I use it on my Android phone, and I've used it on Windows before. So LastPass I have for Mac also. LastPass is on every platform, so they're pretty across the board.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to describe how the password from a vault like that is less accessible to the hackers than the password from a site? I mean, I'm not sure I understand that. What makes that password more secure?
So the difference is this. So many people, so the difference is not necessarily, you can still copy a password out of that vault and put it into a malicious site, and that password is compromised, right? The difference is that many people, and I assume a couple people on here, and I have done this in the past, will reuse either the same one password or maybe 2 passwords or even 5 passwords over and over among many different sites. And what'll happen is if you've done that, the bad guys may know what sites you're on, and they'll start trying to use that password against those other sites to break into them. Maybe try to get your credit card information or other personal information. So the password vault is a way for you to store unique passwords, right? So it'll just generate them. You have to remember your one password to get in. You're never going to put that on another site because no one's asking you for your vault password, because that's your own personal little app, right? And so everything in there is unique, so that if you do get compromised, you can look up where you use that, and you only have to replace it once, as opposed to if, let's say, you use the same password for, I don't know, Facebook and Instagram and your email and, maybe Netflix, right? So if the bad guys if you accidentally get tricked and you put your password in, or if you share passwords with somebody and they put it in, then all of those sites could be compromised. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Hey, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. He's got about 15 minutes before he's got to go off to another meeting. So we're going to have you come back after this one too. Can't hear you. Oh. You got to turn your audio on. Unmute audio. No.
Muted.
Can't hear him. Can't hear you. Unmute.
He's muted now.
I know, and I'm trying to unmute him and it's not working.
Oh, no. It's sign language time.
Linda, you have host privileges or no?
No, I'm signed in as the host, I think. There must be some recording, but.
Yeah, it should be.
Let's do this. We'll send him a note. Where is he?
Who are you trying to send a note to?
Greg, can you hear us?
Greg's still up.
It says I'm muted by your.
Now you're good.
Can hear you. Turn up the volume.
We heard him for a moment, didn't we?
We
Yeah,
did.
we did.
You heard me for a moment?
There you go.
We're hearing it now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. We're rocking and
I
rolling.
was muted by the host and I couldn't figure out how to So Linda asked me to talk with you about Youth Exchange, and I was curious, you know, exactly what it is that your interest is. As she explained that you were interested in being involved in some fashion. So, you know, I don't really know what the best way to do that is. So I thought I would just give you an overview. I'm Greg Starup. I'm past district chair of District 50/50 Youth Exchange and currently serve on the committee in the capacity of the acting treasurer. I'm looking for a treasurer. But I've been involved in Youth Exchange for a number of years. I was an exchange student 50 years ago. As a matter of fact, this May, I traveled back to Oslo, Norway for my 50-year reunion, my 50-year class reunion, which was special. So very, very close to my heart. I would like to poll the group to see what your interest is so that I can really focus in these few minutes that we have. No one's willing to share?
I'll share with you, Greg. I'm Jerry Jackson. I'm also a former exchange student. That's 43 years ago now. And we have one other, our president-elect, she's also a former exchange student from about, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. And so we've got a little bit of knowledge base. We have one of our associate members is also a district chair for his district for Youth Exchange. What the interest is we have a very unique club. We're spread out in 3 countries, actually. Now we have one member in Mexico who's on tonight, and a number of members in Canada and the United States, coast to coast. And so the interest, there's several people that are interested in getting involved with Youth Exchange and maybe even hosting a student or what have you. The thing comes down to is, have you been exposed to where people are dealing with students that might be involved multi-country or maybe certainly multi-city? And your thoughts?
Okay.
Big, hard one.
Well, District 50/50 is an international district, so we've got students hosted in our district, both in Canada and the US, and they come from all over the world. We send out students to other parts of the world. It's a year-long exchange. We also have a short-term program available, which happens generally during the summer, and it's more of a family-to-family exchange where a student will travel to a different country and be hosted by a family there for 3 to 4 weeks, and then that student and the counterpart student in the other family, they'll travel back here together and spend time here. So it's kind of a neat deal. You know what? The big part of Youth Exchange in terms of administration is finding host families, and then also putting on events. We have several events during the year. Some of them are very necessary in terms of educating the students. We have an orientation session for our outbounds, which lasts several days. It's not all at once. We have a 3-day orientation weekend for our inbound students soon after they get here. So those activities take a lot of manpower. They take a lot of planning. We generally have them at a camp or some other sort of facility that can accommodate a large group relatively cheaply. One of the things that we are trying to do in this district is to encourage individual clubs or maybe a group of clubs to sponsor an event for exchange students. The Chilliwack clubs do this for their Christmas parade each December. And the 3 clubs in Chilliwack will get together and find host families for the students and then, you know, provide events and entertainment and that sort of thing for the students, as well as engage with Rotarian members and the community at large. That's an example of clubs hosting events. When Linda asked me, I didn't realize that this group was so geographically dispersed. I thought that it was a local chapter. So I kind of had a plan for that, but that's not going to work out. But what I would like to do is I would like to show you a few pictures perhaps, and we can talk about those, or perhaps you have questions.
Let's start with your pictures.
Okay, I got to figure out how to do this, and we'll.
So down along the bottom, there's a box that says share. There you go.
Okay. So. Now, I don't know if are you seeing my screen? I don't see anything.
I see it.
We can see it. Yep.
Okay, good. So these are our outbound students from District 5050 this year. Those of you who are familiar with the program know that the blazer is kind of the part of the brand. The kids have, they acquire pins from all over the place, and it's kind of a status to have a jacket so heavy that you can barely lift it. And this is our inbound group of students this year, just taken a couple of weeks ago from their inbound orientation. Currently, we have students from Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Peru, Spain, Italy, France, Austria, Germany, Denmark, and Norway. We also host rebound students. These are students who several years ago or last year, sometime in the recent past, were outbound exchange students. We encourage them to continue to be involved in the program and to assist us in with the orientation sessions, with recreation events, and so forth. We find that they really want to remain engaged, and we're trying to build good Rotarians for the future. Several of these students have become Rotaractors. We generally try to host an event in Seattle and then also one in Vancouver. This is a group of our inbound students last year. And that was at the close of their exchange at our district conference. It's really amazing to see the change in students from the beginning of the year to the end. We see that both in our inbounds and outbounds, but because we are so connected to the inbounds while they're here, we really see it. From language acquisition to just general maturity. It's pretty amazing. This is a group of students from our inbound orientation this year. And this is from an event that we held several years ago over near Leavenworth. We take them skiing every year, so there's a ski weekend. And even those who have never seen snow before usually will try. This is one of the most rewarding parts of being involved in the program. This is a picture of one of our inbound students, Martin, who's in the green shirt towards the center of the photograph. He was from France. Towards the end of the year, his family traveled here, and here you see all of the host families and his natural family and all of his host siblings and natural siblings all together. You know, we find that it's not uncommon for people to maintain these relationships for many years. We challenge them too. We put them on a climbing wall or a ropes course. We take them boating. We try to give them a wide range of experiences. Of course, they're attending school too, so they get the full range of school experiences. And, you know, it's always a good thing to dip into the Pacific Ocean. So I don't know what other questions I can handle for you.
Well,
is there a site with all that information on it? Or like the general, like,
well,
program
I can certainly give you the District 5050 website. Every district has a website. Rotary International has a website. But what I will do is, this is our website here. See, that's not the right one. Which one do I want? Here we go. Okay. This is the first time I've used Zoom, so I'm kind of unfamiliar with it. Okay, our website is youthexchange5050.org. And here is information about the program, generally both the long-term programs, the short-term programs. There's information on how to apply as an exchange student, how to apply as a host family. There's several videos posted before describing their experiences. And we have let's see, I think I'm losing my internet connection. No, it's so slow. You know, provides resources for all of the club volunteers who are entrusted with the safety of the students. A large part of the administration of the program is vetting volunteers. We require reference checks, criminal background checks, you know, a number of you know, their interview as well as a long application and training. They are required to complete a course on youth protection and sexual abuse awareness, and they have to pass that. Many of the volunteers are also required to pass the Department of State local coordinator training, which is fairly extensive. So, you know, maintaining the credentials of every volunteer and monitoring the credentials, it takes up a lot of our time. We use a database. which is utilized by many different districts in North America, South America, and Europe. To do this, we're beginning to exchange documentation electronically through this application, which has started to simplify matters.
Anybody have questions for Greg? Could we have you come back at a later date to talk more?
Well, I think that would be fine. It's fairly easy.
I'll coordinate that with you and Brian, our president. I know you've got a meeting.
Yeah, and maybe we can have a little bit of lead time.
Yeah, it was short notice, and I appreciate it. I think all of us appreciate it, but let's have you back at another later date.
Yeah, okay. I am a former member of the Fellowship of Motorcycling Rotarians. I was a member back in '95.
We need to get you back.
2000. Yeah, I ride a K12.
That's what I've got.
Ah, nice.
You could be an associate member, you know. Okay, we'll let Greg go. He's got a meeting at 5:30 to get.
Yeah, and I've got 25 minutes of travel time. So.
All right, thanks, Greg.
Thank you. I enjoyed the meeting and look forward to it again.
All right.
Likewise.
Okay. Brian hasn't made it yet. Does anybody have anything else for today? Crickets. And Brian's not here yet. I guess board members, if you can hang on for a few minutes and we'll see if Brian shows up. If not.
I just had a question, Linda.
Sure.